Hello, my name is Alice Hutchinson. I'm the owner of Byrd's Books, an independent bookstore in Bethel, Connecticut, and I'm thrilled to be the host for this evening. Tonight, we're hosting a conversation between Kira Jane Buxton and Liberty Harding. I will return at the end, and after the discussion, I'll bring your questions and comments to Kira if they haven't picked them up in the chat. Just to mention, the chat is open and active for tonight, so please make comments, please ask questions. Absolutely make use of the chat if you choose to. Tonight's episode is also being recorded, so if you missed something or like to share it with someone, please go back and rewatch. Byrd's Books YouTube channel is right on the front page of our website. A little bit about our author this evening. Kira Jane Buxton's debut novel, Hollow Kingdom, was a finalist for the Thurber Prize for American Humor and the Audio Awards and the Washington State Book Awards, and was named Best Book of 2019 by NPR, Book Riot, and Good Housekeeping. She's also the author of Feral Creatures and tonight's book, Tartufo, which was published Tuesday. She spends her time with 3 cats, a dog, 2 crows, a charm of hummingbirds, 5 stellar jays, and 2 dark-eyed juncos, 2 squirrels, and a husband. Liberty Harding, who will be in conversation with Kira Jane Buxton this evening, has worked as a Hollywood book scout, a Book of the Month judge, an indie bookseller, and more. She presently works as a senior contributing editor for Book Riot and is a co-host of the popular All About the Books podcast. Liberty reads over 600 books a year and lives in the great state of Maine with her husband, 3 cats who hate to read. Please welcome to the screen Kira Jane Buxton and Liberty Harding. Let me grab you and pull you up here, add spotlight. And there's the other one. And now I'm going to go away, ladies, and see you on the other side.
Thank you, Alice.
Thanks, Alice.
You're so welcome.
Hello.
Hi,
I'm going to pretend like I'm saying hello to you for the first time. And not that. I love that Zoom has a green room, which just means we're hiding in the background until it goes live.
Yes.
So
thinly veiled behind the curtain.
Yeah. So this is our second time doing this together. I can't believe it's been 3 years, I think, since Feral Creatures came out, and we did an event for that.
Yes.
I wanted to show you, I own over 200 t-shirts. It's one of my very bad habits is buying t-shirts. And so I always try to find something related to the book that I'm talking about. I didn't have any mushrooms. I didn't really have any pictures of Italy. So the best I could do was this shirt that says Italian Stallion.
It's perfect. I love it. No notes.
You can't see where it goes. So that's what I've got for you today. So
I love
hello. You have a new book.
I do.
Yep.
I do. Tartufo.
Gorgeous bright cover. Yes. And congratulations on its release.
Thank you.
Would you mind telling us in your own words? I mean, I don't know who else's words you would use, but would you mind telling us a bit about the novel, what it's about?
Of course, of course. So Tartufo, I guess the Italian pronunciation is Tartufo, and we say Tartufo. It means truffle in Italian. Truffle as in the smelly, pungent little fungus, the subterranean fungus, as opposed to the chocolatey dessert. And yeah, it is a novel about a teeny tiny village in Tuscany, tucked away in the hills. And this village has really seen better times. They're in kind of debt and dire straits. And it's a thing that happens a lot in small Italian towns where the younger population go elsewhere to make money. And that can sometimes have kind of dire effects on the income for the village. And so this gorgeous little village with lovely, lovely characters, and they're in debt and dire straits until a truffle hunter in the village named Giovanni Scarpazza finds, with his 2 dogs, he has 2 truffle hunting dogs, and they find the biggest truffle on earth that's ever been discovered. And then it's this big question about, will this be a positive thing? Will this help the village, or will this be its detriment? And the interesting thing about truffles is that they don't last very long. They really last about 5 days. So it's something that is potentially worth a lot of money, that will rot in 5 days. And so when this truffle is unearthed, it's chaos, it's mayhem, and yeah, it's a bit of a caper. And I had loads of fun writing it, loads of fun.
And there's lots going on the truffle isn't just mayhem. I mean,
Mhm.
these people, they have secrets, there's fighting, infighting, separation, someone's missing. There's a lot going on in this little village that doesn't seem to have a lot going on.
It's true. It's true.
So,
In a sleepy village, there's a lot happening, yes.
yeah, I don't think it's so much a sleepy village as I don't know what the word is I would use, but there is definitely a lot going on. They just don't have any money. They're broke.
Yes, they are. They're broke. They're broke.
So I know that your parents have a home in Tuscany, and they have for a very long time.
Yes.
And so I was wondering about your relationship with Italy, like if you ever lived there, if you visit a lot, how this inspired the book. If it inspired the book.
Yes.
I know you were back there for a while last year.
Yes, I was. That's right. I was last there in September, October of last year. Yes, my parents live there. They live there full time now. And you're absolutely right. You like a truffle hunting dog. You snuffled right into the truth there. I have a big connection to Italy. So I did not grow up there. I grew up in some really interesting places. I grew up in Dubai, Jakarta, Indonesia, Singapore, Ulsan in Korea, and Texas. Places I think I had a wonderful childhood, wonderful. And those places are big and bustling cities. And I think that, moving around a lot, I was kind of a bit fascinated by the small town community feel. And you remember on like the sort of 80s and 90s, there were so many films about small town communities, gathering and rising up against injustice. Like it's all of Spielberg, right? Right. And so I was kind of fascinated by that experience because it wasn't one I'd had. And my mom tells me that apparently my sister and I, when we were very small, we marched up to her together and we said, "We don't have any roots." And we had English accents back then, so that's a fairly accurate impersonation. But there was some truth in it. I think we felt like we were lucky to move around a lot, but we didn't really feel like we had roots and that community feel in the same way that we would see on TV and in books. And so my mom, I think, took that to heart a little bit. And in the 90s, she was editing a magazine. And in this magazine, there was an article by a woman who was half Italian, and she also had an expat lifestyle, and she had found community and roots in a small village in Tuscany. And so my mom thought, well, let's go see. And so we went to Tuscany and very unimaginatively fell in love with it, as many people do. And we went around and we saw different villages and different houses. And eventually we fell in love with this very particular house. And it's a gorgeous, old, hundreds-year-old farmhouse. There's a barn on the property. It looks out over a beautiful canyon. And above is a big cliff. And I say this, I'm kind of foreshadowing. We may come back to this. So yeah, we ended up, my mom said, all right, we're going to buy it. And they, rather hilariously, the real estate agent said, okay, you'll need to be here at this specific time and you'll need cash. You'll need a cash deposit. And my parents thought, okay. So off they go to the bank and they got out the most money they'd held in their hands and they were given it in a brown paper bag. And they stood outside in this they said it was kind of in the middle of nowhere and nobody was around. And they're just these two tourists standing with this bag of cash, not unlike a drug deal, I would say, like a little bit. And they're standing there with this cash and they're thinking, oh my gosh, well, what are we doing? And suddenly from down the hill, they see this car coming down the hill toward them. And it gets into view and it's a black Mercedes. And they're thinking, oh my gosh, what is happening? And this black Mercedes pulls up and this woman gets out and she's as my mother tells it, she says, she was wearing a fur coat and she had designer jewelry and designer bag. And I was like Cruella de Vil. And she was like, yes, darling, quite Cruella de Vil. So this lady gets out and she, my mom at the time didn't speak Italian. So there was some, grazie, prego going on. And they handed this lady this bag of cash And off she went and drove away with the cash. And they were like, did we just buy a house or did we get robbed? Anyway, it turns out we did indeed buy a house. And so then it was sort of 30 years of wonderful, wonderful. I mean, Tuscany's such a fabulous place, sipping Prosecco under the stars and, sitting out at night and watching the fireflies strobe across the hill where where the sort of valley is. Making pizzas in our hundreds-year-old pizza oven and meeting the people and just beautiful, beautiful memories. And then some odd ones, like we found out that scorpions love to hang out in shoes. That's the whole thing. They love it. There were some snake things. My dad tried to plant a vegetable garden on the terraces, and every night the vegetables were gone, and he couldn't figure out, who is eating my vegetables. And it turned out to be the wild boar, the cinghiale. So he was basically feeding wild boar every night. Yeah, so lovely stuff. But where the village is situated is where the house is situated in relation to the village, it's about a 10-minute walk, and it is a little bit more isolated. And so for my parents, I think they weren't feeling like they were having that community, that they weren't, building they weren't putting down the roots they'd hoped for, because it's really mostly about the people you meet, isn't it? It's about the friendships and let's see. So skip to, then things got a little bit worse. One day my mom was away from the property and my dad was there, and he heard this strange sound, and it was coming from everywhere. And he couldn't figure out what was going on. He walked outside and he kind of walked up like halfway up the driveway where remember I mentioned that cliff behind him? So he's standing there, this sound's coming from everywhere. He walks back down to where the house is and where the car's parked. And allora c'era una frana. There was a landslide. And the whole cliffside came down. And
oh my goodness.
yes, so thank goodness he was okay because he was not in the path of it, but it destroyed the terraces. It took out 100-year-old cherry tree. There was a lot of damage. It really made a big, big mess. And the worst part of this was that we found out from the comune, the sort of governing municipality of the village, that it was going to cost a geologist checked out the area and said, you cannot go back in this house, and it will take 2 million euros to secure
goodness
the land. And so it's one of these things where I tell this because as you read the book, I feel like these are things that might click as to where the inspiration came from. But it's one of those things where it seems like, I don't know if you've had these things happen in your life where it seems like the worst thing that could possibly happen, but then it turns out in some way to be the strangest sort of gift in the long run. Sort of a gift that comes in a really thorny package in a way. Because what ended up happening was my parents ended up renting in the village. And suddenly their life changed. They suddenly became part of the community. They were, seeing everybody daily, and they're, dinner with people every night in the village all together. And there it was, the community. And now I can never get them on the phone because they are having a good time. They're enjoying their lives. They are happy. And so in many ways, this is a very long-winded way of me telling you that this novel is in very much a love letter to the place where, as a family, we finally found roots and community. Yeah.
So as you just said, we can see a lot of that in the novel. It also makes sense to me now why that woman got sick in her shoe. Scorpions. But you did touch on this a tiny bit, but in case there's anybody out there who doesn't know what a truffle is, like the fungus, not the dessert, could you talk a little bit more about what it is, what they taste like? Based on the people you thanked in your acknowledgments, you yourself have foraged for them. If you could talk a little bit about that, what that was like.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked. I think it's also partly why I wrote this novel, because I am a huge truffle pig and I love truffles and I love talking about them because I think they're so fascinating. They're okay. So normally, sort of fungi are our great decomposers. And normally what happens with a mushroom is that, they love decomposing matter, like a rotting tree or grass or wood chips. And that environment provides the right nutrients for the fungi to grow the mushroom. And then the mushroom goes poof and releases its spores, and that's how they propagate. That's the normal mushroom kind of life cycle. Very badly told as like a really terrible science teacher. However, truffles, they're a little bit different. So they are also the fruiting body of a fungi. They grow underground. They're subterranean, and they rely on an ectomycorrhizal relationship. So they rely on symbiosis between a particular type of fungus of the genus tuber and a tree. And so that fungus and tree have to have a good relationship in order, and the right conditions have to happen. Then what happens is the fungi fuses itself to the root of the tree. And as the truffle gives the tree sort of minerals, phosphorus and nitrogen and iron, the tree then reciprocates by giving the truffle sugars and carbohydrates, and they grow a truffle. And the truffle is smelly. We can say about truffles. They are incredibly pungent because they have to release these these volatile compounds, these scents that are irresistible to a lot of different creatures. Us, we love a truffle, most of us. Dogs, pigs, mice, earthworms, a lot of things love truffles. And they require an animal for spore, distribution. So yeah, to put that in a nice way. Yeah. And so I'm fascinated with them because there's something so magical. We don't really know everything about them. And that process just seemed like a wonderful allegory to me, that there has to be a sort of good connection between these two entities in order for something kind of magical to happen. And isn't there something a little bit fairy tale about it? Like, oh, the wizened fungus needs a friend to, create the magical. I get carried away with this stuff. It's fascinating to me. They're also incredibly polarizing. Some people hate them, some people love them. They've been called the diamonds of cookery, and they've been called the testicles of the earth. There's a wonderful I think it's a French proverb that goes, what is it? Those who wish to remain virtuous should abstain from truffles. I mean, everything about it's just a little bit fairy tale to me. Do you like truffles?
I myself have never had one. I haven't. I did ask a couple of my friends who are big foodies, and only one of them had had a truffle, and she said it was an acquired taste.
It is. It's interesting. A lot of people have had truffle oil, and truffle oil can sometimes be real truffle infused with oil, but that's quite rare. In general, truffle oil is a chemical that's called 2,4-dithiopenthane, and it is the one artificial chemical that most closely resembles the 300 plus aromas of a truffle. So I mean, and I like it. I kind of like it, but to each their own, to each their own. But I like polarizing things. I think I do because I've written crows are much the same. People love them, hate them. I think I'm interested in things that people are, kind of can argue about.
But they are like the gems of the food world because, you can't just grow them. If I'm not mistaken, like people can't just plant them and grow truffles, and they're insanely expensive.
Yes, they're very valuable. And part of that is exactly as you say. Technically, there are people that are growing them. I have a friend in Washington State here who is successfully growing a couple of different types of truffle, the Bianchetto and the Perigord, that's incredible that he's able to do it. It's a complicated.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I actually learned how to truffle farm through the Oregon Truffle Festival. I did a 2-day course at the Oregon State University, and it's fascinating. But that's too nerdy. We need to reel that back in. But I think part of why they're so expensive is because they have to be hunted in the wild, and that we cannot sense them. We are unable, with our primitive knows that we are unable to find them ourselves. So it requires a truffle hunting dog. And those in general, or the most known of these, the most specialized dog, purebred dog for truffle hunting is called the Lagotto Romagnolo. It's an Italian breed, and we call them Lagotto, Lagotti, plural. And they're wonderful. I love these dogs. I had one present at my launch last night, and she was, yeah, her name is Pixie, and she's a grand champion Lagotto, and she's a truffle hunter, and she was on fire last night. She had her groom done, and she was mingling. She was really, I mean, she was really working the room. It was fabulous. But yeah, it's to go on a hunt is there's something a bit magical about it. You're in the forest, so automatically you're forest bathing. You're in amongst the trees, and there's that beautiful calmness of being in nature, sort of juxtaposed with this incredible excitement because you're on a treasure hunt. You're looking for gold, and you don't know if you're going to find it. And if you're lucky, maybe you'll get a little scorzoni, the summer truffle. But if you're really lucky, you might strike gold and get a white truffle. The Alba truffle, which is Tuber magnum pico. That's the one everybody is really, really after. That's the one that's featured in Tartufo. Yeah.
But like on a grand scale.
On a grand scale, I have made the largest truffle on Earth. Yeah. The largest truffle on Earth actually was found in 1954 in a little town called San Miniato in Tuscany. And it was found, I'm referring to him as a he. The he truffle was found in San Miniato, and it weighed 5.56 pounds, which is, I mean, just vast. And there really hasn't been one that's come that close in size. And this poor man who found it was a man called Arturo Gallerini, and his dog Parigi found the giant truffle, and he was so stressed that he took it to his priest and said, "What should I do?" The poor man, because he knew madness would happen. He knew it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like in the book.
Yeah.
Real quick, have you read The Truffle Thieves? The book?
Yes.
I did read that. That's wild about, but that's in France, right? I read it so long ago.
Yes, now. That's right. That's right. I think he talks about the truffle orchards in France and some of the very nefarious things that happen. A lot of terrible things, thefts, and
for food, for truffles.
For truffles. They're worth a lot of money, and anything that's worth a lot of money is coveted, and sometimes, the sort of darker elements circle it, A lot of the sort of more fancy food, that's the case, isn't it? And then there's a whole possibility of rip-offs and fake ones, and yeah.
Wild.
Yeah. All for smelly fungus. Can you imagine? It's so exciting to me. I just think it's fabulous.
It's an amazing, little part of food culture.
Yeah.
I'm going to botch some Italian now with my main accent.
Okay.
So I can't remember if we actually mentioned the name of the village yet. The Lazzarini Boscarino.
Lazzarini Boscarino. See, yes. Completely made up village. Completely.
So it's this little dying village, and we have Giuseppina.
Mm-hmm.
And Brava. She is bartender at the only establishment that is still open. Like the restaurant is closed. The bakery place, I think, closed. Yep. She has a flair for the dramatic. She's also not above exposing herself to the tourists, like to the buses that come in to try and get business into the restaurant.
Desperate measures. Measures.
What do you think she wants most in life?
Giuseppina? Mm-hmm. Oh, I love Giuseppina. I had so much fun writing that character. She's just somebody who lives out loud. She lives out loud unapologetically. She's passionate. She wants the best of everything. But I think the thing that she wants the most is for her village to succeed and for the people she loves to thrive. And I think that's such a pure, she's very dramatic. She spends a lot of the book throwing spatulas around, and she's a wild character. She's also very spiritually inclined, and so she has her psychics that she likes to go to confer. And I just loved writing a character who just was so joyful, so openly, gorgeously, unapologetically joyful. Yeah.
No, while she's joyful, we have Delizia.
Delizia?
Yeah, she is stressed. when we
She's
meet her.
super stressed.
She was a veterinarian. Now she's the town mayor, but just barely. She just barely beat out an old donkey, like literally a donkey, to become mayor. And she's stressed about being the mayor. Like, how did she find herself in this situation?
Yeah, she has found herself. So she partly grew up in this village. Her father is from this village, and I think there's a sense for her that there's a real longing in Delitzia for approval from her father, and she never got it. He just wasn't that kind of a father. He wasn't a good father to her. And so that sense of displacement she feels about her relationship with him, but also about the village. She does not feel like this village holds her. So she left it the first opportunity she could, and she became a successful veterinarian, traveled around, she studied at Pisa. And I think that, you know, she's stressed because, you know, she's come back to the village because of circumstances and the passing of the previous mayor, and she has to pick up the pieces, and she doesn't really want to, but however, she does love the people of this village, you know. Just because she didn't thrive there, because her father wasn't so loving, doesn't mean she wants to abandon it. So there's a real sort of purity in that motive of wanting to come back and save things. Yeah.
And so we also have Giovanni. He's the truffle hunter with the dogs that find this truffle, this enormous 6 point whatever pound truffle.
0.14. I went big. Go big or go home. Yeah.
So I mean, there's so many reasons why so many people do things, but we only have a limited amount of time. But he finds this truffle, and at first he's like trying to sneak it into the village, but eventually ends up sharing it with the village, and they're going to do something with it, you know, sell it, maybe save the village. Like, how did he come to make this decision, like that he was going to share his riches with the village?
Yeah. I think he sort of he's in a real pickle when he finds this truffle. Truffle hunting is the thing that really saves Giovanni. He's had some hard things happen in his life. He loses his partner, Paolo, and that leaves him in a space where he is really underwater with grief. And the one thing that makes him feel alive, that saves him, is time and time again, is being out in the woods with his beautiful dogs and truffle hunting. And on a real truffle hunt, you get a sense of that, the closeness between the truffle hunter and their dog, because there's trust, there's respect, and there's joy when there's a hunt happening. And so that was amazing to write those scenes with Giovanni, somebody who's really in a lot of pain, and then also finding healthy ways to cope. And so he's out in the forest, he finds the world's biggest truffle, and he knows that this is going to be, you know, tremendous pressure on him. He knows that the world is going to put a spotlight on him. When people find big truffles, they go to auction, usually at the big auction houses. And then, you know, celebrities are there. Oprah is there. Jay-Z loves truffles. He's there. You know? So Giovanni is already, as soon as he finds his truffle, he's going, oh my God, I've opened a can of worms. This is going to change everything. And so his decision initially is to hide the truffle, is to not share this truffle. He will figure out what to do with it. So he tries to sneak it back in the village. But as you say, he does have a little bit of a change of heart. And I think that is because he knows his village is in trouble and he wants to do the best for his community. And I think I mean, I love that you're asking this about these characters, because I actually hadn't realized how pure everybody's motives actually are, and that truly it's a book about how important it is to have community, how important we are to each other, how important connection and bonds with other people and friendship and neighbors. It's so important, and that's really it. Yeah.
So I've heard here and there over the years, and not just from Criminal Minds, that smell is the strongest of our senses when it comes to conjuring memories and emotions. Like, it brings things back to us so quickly. And the senses are such a huge part of this novel. I mean, you described seeing and tasting and touching, but smelling is so important because that is what the animals do. That is how they find the trouble. That it's a big part. And I was wondering, like, how you thought about these senses, and also did you spend any time like sniffing things? Were you sniffing truffles, being like, this is how I'm going to write about this in the book?
Oh, I sniff everything. I go into a bookstore and sniff books. I don't know if anybody does that. If they do, please let me know, because I feel, oh yes, Alice does. That's amazing. I love to do that. I go in the bookstores smell like heaven to me. Like just and and then the difference between a new book, which is delicious, and an old book, and oh, I love to, yeah. And for this book, after I confess my weird book sniffing issues, um, I had so much fun with scent. I think I am someone who does, I have a good palate with food. I do, and I love to eat. I'm a big foodie, and I think scent is fascinating, in part because of the way you're absolutely right. Scent and nostalgia absolutely are connected. And that's partly because when we smell something, scent takes a direct route to the limbic system, which is where the amygdala and the hippocampus are. And that's where we process emotion and memory. And so those experiences to me are so wonderful I mean, not always, sometimes it brings back a not so fresh memory, but when you smell something and we've all had the experience, haven't we? You smell something and you kind of go back in time. What happened? Where did I go? I remember on one truffle hunt I did at my friend's truffier, his truffle orchard. There was a guy there who had never experienced a truffle before. And this was his first time. And my friend Mike's Lagotto Romagnolo, whose name is Aldo, the truffle dog, found a truffle. And so we were all, going around and having a sniff of that truffle fresh from the ground, all those really particular scents. There's a sort of, to me, there's cabbage notes, there's a little bit of a sweetness to a fresh truffle that goes away very quickly, I noticed. So that's one of the special things. It's 300 volatile compounds that you're inhaling. And this guy, I saw him, he took a sniff, and I saw him and I saw his pupils dilate. And I saw he was having this kind of moment, and I thought, oh, I'll let him have that moment. That seems like a very special moment. And then I thought, no, I'm going in. And I said, okay, it says, okay, what is it that you smell? And he said, campfire. And he said, the campfire from when I was a kid, the campfires we sat at when I was a kid. And I was so struck by that because I've sniffed quite a few truffles at this point. And I've never smelled campfire. And I think it's so wonderful that that was a specific emotional, nostalgic moment for him that is so different to what I experience when I smell a truffle. So I'm obsessed with scent. I think, finding ways to play with language and to try to recreate what it is when you smell something. What is it when you smell fresh cut grass? And what is it when you smell, what does this remind you? What is it, where are you feeling this when you're enjoying these scents? I now can't remember if that was the question at all, but I've gone off on my own.
Smelling things,
Sniffing books.
Things. So your first two books are told from the perspective of animals.
Yes.
And Tartufo has some perspectives from critters as well. There's a cat, dogs, a goat, ants, deer, pigs, donkeys. What do you love about writing from an animal's perspective?
Oh, that's such a wonderful question. I'm not entirely sure why I feel more comfortable writing from the perspective of an animal than I do of a human. What does that say about me? I don't know.
Well, I mean, if you ask me, the first thing that strikes me is that you're a huge animal lover, as a lot of us are, but I mean, you really spend a lot of time with animals in your yard, seeing animals. Yes. So I mean, that strikes me as like why you might choose to do it.
It's very true. I spend a lot of my time, as a writer, I think until my husband started working from home, I 100%, 100%, I can't say that, spent my time with animals all day long. I'd have my animals that I live with indoors, and then I would go outside, and I've befriended a crow who follows me, and before that, the original crow, I befriended T. I'd go and hang out with her in the afternoons, and I think when you spend time with animals, I think there's a sort of ineluctable thing that happens you really recognize that they have very complex personalities and individual personalities and mannerisms. And I think, yeah, I think I would love to see more people write from the perspective of animals, with care, with judiciously and with reverence. But I think it's a fascinating thing to think about their perception of the world. And yeah, I I love it. I love it. I will continue to do it. I think also I think one of the reasons I do it is because I hope that it brings people um, a better understanding of how similar we are to a lot of creatures, how we do actually share a lot of traits. Yeah.
And so this book has a huge cast of characters, huge, like, cast of characters at the beginning of the novel. And why did you decide to go from doing, first person, or I guess first crow, really, we should say,
First Crow. I love
to
it.
a large number of narrators?
Yeah. You've hit on this was my biggest worry when I wrote this, because I thought, okay, I'm writing about this village and there's going to be a lot of characters, and I'd never written anything with so many characters, and I was terrified that it would be overwhelming, that I would be overwhelmed, and it took a lot of care figuring out how to, when you write something, everything you write is the first time you've ever done it. Every book you're coming to is kind of learning how to write this book from scratch. Every book is different. Every article is different. And this was no exception. I had to kind of trust that I could make it work, and I could give each character enough time to be there and to express themselves and to be present and engaged in the chaos that was happening, or the scene that was happening. Um, but it started out to be something terribly intimidating, and I ended up enjoying it tremendously, tremendously. I had so much fun. I had so much fun. I could imagine being with them and hearing them, squabbling, or, and it also, with so many characters, it allows you to sort of really make a scene very rich, because there's so many little moments happening. Somebody's sneaking off doing this in the corner, and somebody's whispering to somebody else, and it just makes for a really lively scene, especially when you write comedy, I think. Yeah.
In my head, I mean, it's probably not true, but in my head, I know that writing is a lot of work, but when I imagine you writing, you're just cackling a lot and having a great time.
I do cackle. I mean, you heard it right now. I cackle all the time. Yes.
That's how I picture it.
I have my beloved nephews, and one of them said I sound like a witch. Which is I kind of love it. I love it. Yeah, do I laugh? I don't know, actually. I think my, I don't know what my writing looks like. It's a lot of like imagining and staring out the window, and there are moments where I do laugh. There's a character in the novel called Carlotta, and she's a lovely, funny character, and some of her lines when I read them make me laugh still, which is, when you've written it and you've edited it a lot, and then you've published, it's kind of rare that you laugh at your own stuff. But it's that character makes me laugh. She entertains me. She really tickles me. Yeah.
Your favorite character? Or do you have a favorite character?
I don't know if I have a favorite character. Everybody.
Al Pacino, myself.
Was it? Oh, I love it. Al Pacino, the ornery cat.
Yes.
Yes. One of the characters I loved writing is a character called Chef Umberto Micucci. Chef Umberto. And I had so much fun because he's a really arrogant chef. He's a high-end chef, and he's really, and he's a lovely character in some ways, because he's really worked very hard to become a huge success, and he's a huge success, and but describing the way he treats his sous chef and the ridiculous things he does in his kitchen, I had so much fun with that. I think it's because I watch a lot of Chef's Table. Do you watch Chef's Table at all?
I don't.
Oh,
Is
it's one.
is that a reality show? Is it a cooking show?
It basically, they follow, every episode follows a very successful high-end chef or a very unique, wonderful chef. It's cinematically beautiful, and it's also just like the food that they create is incredible, and it's just beautiful. It's just, I just love it so much. So this was kind of my very over the top ridiculous take on that.
So someone in the chat was asking the story behind Delicia's last name.
Oh, Mikuchi.
Yes.
It's a pretty common name in the Tuscan area. Yeah, I think here in the States there's there's an actress who has that last name. I'm not sure what her first name is, but yeah, I don't really know the specifics other than I know it as a last name from certainly the area we are. Yeah.
So, and speaking of Tuscany, this is like totally random, but it's stuck in my head, and I like to look things up when I'm reading. At the very beginning, you're talking, or I should say, not you, but one of the characters is talking about like all the things in the large cities and the touristy places, and they're talking about Venice, and they mention Palazzo Dario and call it the murder house.
Yes.
They like it actually like, and they have a house that kills people. So I had to Google it. And I couldn't find that story on its wiki page. I did learn that one of the managers for the Who owned it for a while, but I was wondering if that's like a true thing that you saw in Venice, if you knew why it's the murder house.
I hilariously can't remember at this point.
That's fine.
It's hard to know. Like, sometimes I've taken liberties with things. Some things are very real. The one thing that is like Lazzarini Boscarino fabricated. The town of Pietrasanta is referenced in it, and that is a real town where one of the characters lives. It's a beautiful place, worth a visit. And then things like, I think in that same chapter that you're talking about, I mentioned that in Venice, certain hotels have given people orange water pistols because eagles are swooping down and stealing their sandwiches and their food. And that is true. And so, so it's like finding these beautiful, crazy moments and putting them in the book, but also kind of embellishing on things too.
I'm just going to actually ask you about that.
Yeah.
The water pistols.
I don't know what hotels it is. I don't know, I'll figure it out. But isn't that funny? I love a seagull. I love a seagull. I love a seagull who's a thief.
Liberty, may I ask a question?
Of course.
Because I'd like to follow up with your question. You talked about the animals, and one of the things that I loved was the ants and the donkey, of course, Al Pacino, the cat, but Glees. Now, I started reading the book, and then when the audio came out, I switched to audio so that I could sort of do my laundry while I listened, kind of thing. And hearing it spoken was a completely different experience than reading it. And by the very end, I did them both at the same time, just so that I could see what the Italian names looked like. I love the audio version. It's really quite something because she pronounces the Italian so well.
She does. That's Caroline Hewitt, and she is phenomenal. This is not an easy book to narrate.
No.
I mean, she has to switch from English to Italian pronunciation. There's a million Italian names. Sometimes there's a little bit of actual Italian. She did it so beautifully. And yeah, I've been in touch with her just to kind of gush and say, oh, yeah, phenomenal.
It was incredible because she really differentiated the characters in her dialogue. So that I just wanted to give you props for, but I have to ask you about this cover. Oh my gosh.
I know.
What deliciousness.
I'm worried it's gonna, somebody in the space station is gonna fall over because it's so, it's you can be seen from outer space. It's beautiful. That is done by a gentleman called Jared Taylor, and he has now done all three of my book covers. And
oh, really?
Yeah, he did all three. He's from Seattle, and he's a phenomenal artist. And he did such a wonderful job with my first two books that my team approached him and said, "Would you consider doing Kira's new novel?" And he agreed. And I am so happy he did, because it's just, my agent calls it a joy bomb. And that
Mhm.
is, that is the vibe of the book. And so to have somebody who's able to, really have create a cover that really communicates the soul of the book. I mean, what more could you ask for? It's just phenomenal.
It was astonishing.
Yes.
Also, I didn't know what
Please,
gleesglees were,
please, yeah,
so I
yeah.
looked them up in the definition. They're European edible dormouse.
Or European
Really?
or European fat dormouse. That's their two names.
Yes.
And they do not deserve these hideous names. They are the cutest things in the universe. They are so sweet. They're very destructive. They do chew down, windowsills and trees, and but they
Oh
are
my.
adorable. They're like the cutest squirrel chipmunk hybrid you could ever imagine. Yeah, adorable. Alice, I have a question for you. May I?
Of course.
Okay, so you were the mayor of your town.
Yes, in New England we call it first selectman.
Wow. Can I ask what that was like, and was it at all similar to what Delitzia goes through?
Very much so, because you do have this crisis of conscience. I mean, you have the minute you're elected, you sort of go into this imposter syndrome of what did I do to get here, even though you've worked very hard to get there. It's a very steep learning curve, but also it's the only job I've ever had that used every single one of my skills,
Ugh.
everything I've ever learned. And I was really it was a joy. It was an absolute joy. And it's all a service job. And
Mm.
that's the thing that was so joyful about it, is that you could go to work every day and help other people all day long.
Oh,
Because whether you're paving a road, or whether you're replacing a mailbox, or passing a school budget, or whatever it is you do, it's all service. So it was delightful. And then the good old boys wanted their town back. So,
oh, boo.
oh, boo. But it, her experience in the book, I really love that character. She was just, all the things that she goes through, I think are very legitimate. You clearly talk to someone who's in some way or another gone through something like that, where you all of a sudden go, I want to be able to do these things, and then there's what seems insurmountable odds to do them. So as a character, she was just lovely. She really was well drawn, a lot of fun, but the people around her were just chaos. It
Yeah,
was just
absolute
incredible.
chaos. No one
I
helps
mean, it
her.
was, yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Oh, I
I really
love that.
enjoyed her. I
Oh,
really enjoyed her. I also wanted to ask you about Giovanni and Paolo.
hmm.
Giovanni's the man who finds the truffle, of course, but his partner is deceased. And how much of a backstory did you have to create for yourself to write that life, that person?
Hmm.
Um,
Quite a lot. Yeah, it in terms of backstory, it really depends on the character. Sometimes it just is very automatically clear to me, and I can sort of know where these characters have been and where they've come from. Um, it's funny you ask that. I'm writing something now, and I'm having a really difficult time finding these characters and their backstory, and I've never had that problem before. And so it's interesting. I've been thinking about that a bit. What is it that sometimes a character is so clear? And for Paolo and Giovanni, their relationship was so clear to me and so pure, and the fact that you know, there's some really, really lovely, tender moments that we kind of experience through backstory and memory. We experience them through memory from, usually when there's a truffle, or the truffle sometimes, or someone gets a sniff of truffle and then they're remembering, and that's when we get the backstory. And Giovanni and Paolo, I would say it was just very clear to me. Yeah, I didn't spend a long time, going back in their history. It was sort of like, I know where these two met. I know that Paolo is passed. I know, yeah. And there's a really lovely moment where in some ways Paolo sort of revisits You know, there is a sort of mystical element to the novel, I would say, as well, isn't there? And yeah.
Well, you do bring that. I mean, look at there's a fortune teller in it,
Yeah.
and she weaves in and out, back and forth throughout the story as a mention, and then
Yeah.
as a character. And it's a fascinating look at it where, with any group of people, they'll look at a fortune teller and they'll just say poo poo or what is it you want to tell me?
Yeah.
It's one extreme to the other. And
Yeah.
she was a lot of fun. That
Yeah.
character was great.
Fun to write. Fun to write. Yeah. There's a thread of the spiritual versus the scientific in the novel. And it's not always versus. Some of it's often sort of entwined. And I found that really fun to play with and to investigate and to follow, just follow these little threads of curiosity and see where you go. Yeah.
Is that how you write? I mean, do you outline your books? Oh, you do. So
Well,
you have a sense of the book when you start, or do you let it write itself as you write? Or both, what's your
yeah.
process?
The writer terms for this, the very highbrow writer terms, we say you're either a plotter or you're a
Or a
pantser,
pantser?
right?
Yeah.
And I'm both. I'm both a plotter and a pantser. I need to have some structure. I need there to be some bones down solidly to build on. Um, However, I also need freedom to play and to have that wonderful thing that happens sometimes when you're free writing and you're just sort of figuring out characters and who's in this scene, and then the weirdest sort of wonderful moments where it clicks and something happens and you're just sitting there and it's almost like you're not writing. You go into that wonderful flow state. Um, so I'm a little bit of both. I'm a little bit of both. And then a big editor. I'm also somebody that needs to um, I need to start with a really solid beginning, something that I can come back to as I move forward. So I edit pretty heavily in the early draft as I go, which is, I know a lot of writers that don't do that. They do a wonderful write and then all of it's about revision, revision, revision. I kind of edit pretty heavily as I go.
Wow, that is different.
It's
Yeah,
different. It's,
I had to process that for a minute
yeah.
because now do you skip around or do you write it straight through as a chronological process?
Chronologically. Yeah,
Wow.
chronologically. And what else? Oh, I was going to say there's also a weird thing that I have where when I have an idea for a novel, part of how I know that this is the idea I'm going to work on is that I have a really clear feeling about the book as a whole. And I don't even know if I can communicate this, but I have a hard time explaining what the book is, but I can feel what the book is. Like I can feel its beginning and its middle and end. And I had that for Hollow Kingdom. I had it for Feral Creatures, and I had it for Tartufo. This kind of, I know what this book is. I'm at the moment I can't communicate it, and it takes me time to, it's very odd. I don't know how to describe that. It's like
Do
almost
you,
like, yeah.
no, go ahead.
Oh, I
Almost
was
like
gonna
a,
say almost like an, like a, I don't even know how to say it, like a feeling overview. That just sounds insane. Maybe it is.
well, do ideas for other things come to you during the process of writing this? I mean, little sparks come in where you just have to write them down and put them aside, just
I
to
wish. I wish. I tend to be pretty, deep into a project and I'll
deep into
think,
it.
yeah. Um, I love it when one thing that has happened is that I will be working on a project and sometimes at night I will be hearing another character. So, and again, this also sounds a bit like insanity, but at night, sometimes, I'll wake up and I'll get a line from a character or I'll get a scene or it's usually dialogue. It's usually a character kind of yeah, some really nice thing that I can build around. That sometimes happens. And that happened with ST. And
Oh,
yeah,
I'll bet.
yeah. He's very loquacious Byrd. I'm always hearing from him.
Do you ever miss him?
Yeah, I think that's probably partly why I haven't finished the third novel, because I just don't feel ready to close the door on him. I like that, he's
That's
still
okay. We'll read it when you write it.
he's hope. That's ST is the embodiment of hope. He is hope for
I still
humanity.
have my chips clip.
Do you?
Yes,
Wonderful.
I do.
I love that. I was just
That
at my
might,
book launch last night. I just saw a really nice ST tattoo. One of
oh
the,
my,
it's gorgeous. He's looking good. He's looking good. He's on an ankle.
that's great.
Yeah.
Ha- do you, did you tell Stanley Tucci that you mentioned his name as a peripheral, just a walk on?
I haven't bumped into Mr. Tucci yet, but I very much hope
I'm
to.
sure he'll
I
find
love
you.
Stanley Tucci.
I
I'm a
do
big fan.
too.
I'm a big fan
Me
of Stanley
too.
Tucci. Yeah. I do a fun thing to share that I'm allowed to tell part of is that it has been optioned to be a film. So Tartufo.
This,
Hmm.
oh, what a
Yeah,
perfect film. Oh,
yeah.
how wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow, day two.
Yeah,
We're talking about this on day two. Oh,
I
that's
know.
so wonderful. Congratulations to you. What
Thank
a
you.
great honor.
I am very honored. I'm very excited. It's a big deal. So it'll be really, really fun to see that develop, and then we'll have to have a viewing party, won't we?
Yes, we will.
Yeah.
We'll do that. We have a nice little independent book theater right down the street.
Lovely,
So you're
lovely.
going to have to come east, and Liberty's going to have to drive down from Maine. That's all there is to it.
Yes, please.
Well, do you all, yes, Greenwood Features. Thank you, Sherry, for the chat. Um, do you have any further questions, Liberty? I mean,
No, I mean, I have a ton of questions, of course, but I covered
I
it
do
all.
too, but
You hit upon, the third book. I was just I'm sure you're tired of being asked about it, but I was gonna say, I don't know if you've seen, you were talking about having hope. There are a lot of listings online for the third Hollow Kingdom book, which you haven't even finished writing. I didn't know if you had
Ah,
seen that because
are
the
there?
internet is always correct. But yeah, well, I
Oh,
was looking for some other stuff about this book. I came across some that was like date to be announced, but they were like placeholders. And I was like, I can't remember now in our last
oh,
interview if you were working on it or if there was going to be another
yeah.
one.
No, I haven't seen that, and so yeah, don't click on that because that's not real.
Yeah, people are just
That's
so excited. They put them up on Goodreads and stuff,
yeah.
but
It's a fake truffle. It's a fake truffle. Yeah, I have started it. I started it, and then the pandemic happened, and I had to switch gears a little bit. I think, I was getting a lot of emails and um about, there being similarities with the animals, and yeah. And so I joyfully stepped away and wrote Tartufo, and I've got, some other things that I'm working on at the moment. But I will definitely, I know I will come back to ST. And it'll be great because I'll have had time, and sort of more interesting adventures for him to go on for sure. We need ST.
well,
He's the
the
bird.
person who wrote the question about the name, about Delicia's last name, his next little comment was, I miss ST.
Oh.
So he
Oh.
private messaged me in the chat. So he said, I miss
Oh.
ST.
That's so lovely. Oh,
He's my
that's so
ST
lovely.
friend. We talk about him.
Yeah.
I don't have any further questions. I love your use of animals. I love the village. I love that they're working toward coming together. I find it a very positive and enriching book to read about really about community.
Yeah.
Um, and that part of it is so necessary and helpful right now. I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now for hundreds of different reasons.
Yes.
And this just is something that is humorous and nature loving and community focused. And I applaud you on your achievement. And it's a wonderful book. It's got a great sense of humor. It's crazy, it's wonderful, it's riotous, it's cuckoo, it's all of those wonderful things. um and it's so well written. I love your language. Your use of language is quite it's so rich. So thank you so much for all that you have written. I want to thank all of you for attending tonight. I'd like to thank Liberty for co-hosting with us tonight and asking such wonderful questions. You guys are just such good friends. You can tell it's an easy conversation, um, and we're the richer for it. So, on that note, I just want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. And I look forward to having another event with you, Kira,
Alice,
at
thank you.
some
The
point.
pleasure.
Thank you.
In Italian, we say piacere mio. That's my pleasure. And truly, I couldn't have asked for a more lovely event, a more wonderful conversation partner in Liberty. And I'm just so thrilled. And I can't wait to one day be in your bookstore in person. I'm putting that out.
We're looking forward
So,
to that too. We'll put
yeah.
that out in the universe and see if we can make that happen. But in the meantime, please enjoy the rest of your book tour. You have quite a great schedule coming up with a lot of happy fans that'll be there for you. And I just want to wish you all the best and congrats again on your wonderful book.
Thank you so much. And thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you,
for
ladies.
watching.
Yes. Night night.